Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, and we're into the next witness, which is a big one, and this is only part one. It's Cindy Anthony. So we start with, the beginning of everything. After moving to Orlando, Cindy couldn't work straight away because she had to change over her nursing license. They moved to Florida because her parents and her in-laws and her brother were there. Cindy found out Casey was pregnant on 30th of June 2005, and Kaylee was born on the 9th of August. Casey went to Cindy's work to tell her. They went to sit in Cindy's car and had the conversation. The Anthonys attended a wedding in Myrtle Beach for one of her brothers on the 8th of June 2005. At the time, Cindy wasn't really suspicious of Casey being pregnant up until the day of the wedding. Obviously on about the bloating and not noticing she had a belly. So Cindy explains this by saying Casey was having some female issues, which she had always had. They had a discussion about Casey's periods months before the wedding. Her and Casey were basically on the same cycle, so they would talk and compare symptoms, and bloating is one of the symptoms they both suffered with badly, and they would joke about looking pregnant. Cindy had not noticed that Casey had put on a little weight, but Cindy had thought it was because she was at a desk job. She was sat down a lot, so she wasn't getting a lot of exercise. So, the last thing that came to her mind was that Casey was pregnant. And Casey's saying it's not a situation she would hide from people, even if she was. Once Cindy found out about the pregnancy, she started to plan a baby shower and spoke to the entire family. She told Casey that her and George would continue to support Casey and the baby. They prepared for the baby and took Casey shopping for maternity clothes and turned their computer room into Kaylee's nursery. They then show a picture of Kaylee's bed, and obviously Cindy gets really upset by this. I'm inserting a clip of Cindy here.
You see that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you recognize it to be?
Kaylee's bed.
Then they start by showing Cindy an aerial view of her home, and they go through everything that's in the backyard. And obviously they're going to the pool. They show how they get to the pool, down the side of the house, the sheds they have. Then the pool, and the pool is over 4 foot, but definitely under 5 foot. They show the backyard, Kaylee's playhouse, Kaylee's sandbox and picnic table, the Anthony's living room, and from the living room they show the most frequently used entrance from the living room onto the patio. And they show the latch lock on the glass sliding door. The latch lock is on the handle. You flip the lock up and down, and behind the glass door is a screen door which is mostly left open. There is also a lock on the screen door, but they don't really use it. After going through the glass door, there are 2 more doors that can be used to get out. These doors both have locks on the handle. There is a sliding glass door in the master bedroom which opens out into the backyard, but the main glass door is the one that they use the majority of the time. Since Kaylee was a toddler, they took measures to childproof their home. They put devices over the doorknobs, outlet protectors, rearranged where dangerous items were collected, like bleach and washing powder and things like that. Locks on the bathroom, everything they could do, they did. June 2008, Kaylee was 2.5, and Kaylee would sleep with Casey in her room, but would take the occasional nap in her own room. Kaylee would speak very well, to the point she could tell a story. She sounds such a bright girl. Cindy wouldn't go more than 24 hours without seeing Kaylee. On Father's Day of 2008, Cindy had Kaylee. She took her to see Cindy's father, who was in a nursing home at the time. She believes Casey was working that day and Lee had moved out by then and Georgia was working. So Cindy took Kaylee to go visit Cindy's father for a few hours, and while she was there she took some photos and videos of Kaylee, and they show a photo of her. After seeing her dad in the nursing home, Cindy took Kaylee to see Cindy's mum, and then they went home. When they got home, Kaylee wanted to go swimming, and they did actually have lunch at Cindy's mum's, but Kaylee didn't eat very much, so Cindy said, "You need something to eat first." And then they went in the pool. Now we explain the pool and how accessible it is. There's a detachable ladder. Part of the ladder, the top bit is permanently attached to the pool, but you take the bottom bit off. And once Kaylee became a toddler, they would take the ladder off all the time. The ladder is too heavy. It's light but too heavy for a toddler to carry. Cindy would help Kaylee up the ladder, then Cindy would get in the pool and Kaylee would jump into her arms in the pool. She said they were in the pool for at least an hour and Kaylee would wear a life jacket in the pool. While they were in the pool, Casey came home. Casey didn't get in the pool. She helped Kaylee get out of the pool, wrapped her in a towel and took her in the house, and then Cindy got out and removed the ladder. That evening was a very special and emotional evening because that day was probably the last day that Cindy would see her dad, as he was very sick, but Cindy was excited to show Casey the videos and the photos that she'd taken that day. George arrived home late evening after Cindy, Casey and Kaylee had gone to bed. The next day Cindy had to go to work early. After the day 15th of June, Cindy never saw Kaylee again. Cindy did believe that Casey had a job at Universal Studios as an event coordinator. Again, she had no reason not to believe her daughter. Sometimes she worked through the day and sometimes the evening. Cindy had seen Casey's lanyard from work and also emails from her boss. The lanyard had Casey's picture on it and had a Universal Studios tag on it. Cindy questioned her about this and Casey said it was just something... Oh, skipped a bit. She had a name tag and one day she came home with somebody else's name on and Cindy questioned her about it and she said, "Oh, it's just something they did for fun." Cindy had seen Casey at work before and seen pictures of Casey at... She had seen Casey at work and seen pictures of Casey at work. The pictures she saw of Casey at work were before Kaylee was born. After Kaylee was born, she believed Casey went back to work at Universal. Cindy had met Casey's boss and Casey printed out an email from her supervisor at work. Don't know why, As said previously, Cindy would look after Kaylee when Casey was at work, or it would be George if he was home. If both were working, Casey made arrangements with someone else. So on the 16th of June, they believed Kaylee was with Zanny the nanny. They believed Zanny was a friend of Casey's. They did not have a full name at that point for Zanny. Casey had spoken about Zanny in 2006. So now they talk about where Zanny came from. So they start talking about a friend of Casey's called Lauren Gibbs, who Cindy had met and knew where she lived, whereas she had never met or seen Zanny. She was told that Zanny lived in the same complex as Casey's work friend Jeff, but Casey had told Cindy that Zanny moved around quite a lot. Casey always had extra clothes with her when going to work. They never found Zanny. They looked from the 15th of July until 6 weeks before this trial. I think that's one of the big things in this trial is that this Zanny nanny person was never ever found. Back to the 16th of June, she went to work. Cindy and Casey had a brief conversation late in the afternoon around 4ish and maybe lasted about 4 seconds. Casey had told her she was going to spend the night at Zanny's with Kaylee, as Cindy and George were available to look after Kaylee. So it made sense to Cindy that Casey would take Kaylee to Zanny's and stay over, as Casey had an early start the next day. Cindy's not... I don't know, she's trusting her daughter, you know, which any mother would. Cindy just presumed that she would see them the next day. She didn't, because Casey had told Cindy that she would have a long day at work, so Kaylee would stay with Zanny. Cindy thought she would see Casey and Kaylee on the Saturday, 21st of June. Cindy spoke to Casey every day that week when she didn't see her. During that week, Cindy asked to speak to Kaylee on the phone, but she didn't, as Casey would make an excuse every time. So she waited until the Saturday to see them. She didn't see them on that Saturday. Casey rearranged for Monday, as Casey met up with friends who had a child themselves to take them to the park for the day. Cindy didn't see them on the Monday. She waited all day, and she'd asked Casey to call her and let her know that they had got home safe when they obviously arrived home. It got to about 4 p.m. and she still hadn't heard from Casey, so she started to get worried at this point. She spoke to a co-worker about it, saying, I've not heard from my daughter, I don't know where she is. She tried calling and left messages. Later that evening, she heard from Casey. She wasn't home. She told her that there had been a car accident involving Zanny's vehicle. She reassured Cindy that her and Kaylee were fine and they were at the hospital. Cindy asked again to speak to Kaylee, but again Casey found an excuse, saying one of the other friends that they were with had taken Kaylee and another child for a walk around the hospital. So we now go back to the 24th of June, the infamous shed incident. Cindy remembers it. Cindy was made aware that George had called law enforcement about it because George called her. Cindy spoke to Casey about it, but she can't remember what Casey's response was. Cindy learned that Casey had gone to the house later that day with gas cans because George told her about it. Cindy's a bit stuck in the middle here. Cindy spoke to Casey after because she thought she was at the hospital like she told her she was. So obviously, there's this crap going on with Casey and George, but Cindy's got worries of her own regarding Casey. Casey told her that she had volunteered to go to Zanny's apartment to get her medical insurance stuff. She stopped home to get some things. Cindy asked her why she was running around for Zanny when it should be one of her family members, and Casey said that, Zanny's mother was very ill and other families weren't available, blah, blah, blah. Cindy also said, why didn't Casey bring Kaylee home to ease the burden, basically, and Casey just wanted to keep her with her. Because Cindy hadn't seen Kaylee for a while, Cindy would sleep with Kaylee's favourite teddy bear, but at some point it had gone missing. Now we're at 27. Sorry about that, it paused again. So as I was saying, because Cindy hadn't seen Kaylee for a while, Cindy would sleep with Kaylee's favourite teddy bear, but at some point she'd noticed it had gone missing. 27th of June, Cindy expected Casey and Kaylee to come home. They didn't come home because Casey wanted to go see her friend Jeff and his son, who was a year older. Jeff had moved out of state a while ago and was back in town. Cindy believes that Jeff and Casey had got close at some point. Cindy had never met Jeff, although she was supposed to have met him numerous times. Casey was supposed to come home late that night. She obviously didn't. According to Casey, Jeff invited Casey, Kaylee and Zanny to stay with him and they would go out the next day. Cindy points out that Casey is a grown, independent woman, so she never ordered Casey to come home. She just wanted to see her and Kaylee and spend time with them. I agree entirely. The week beginning the 30th of June, Cindy was on vacation from work to the following week after the 4th of July weekend. Cindy did expect to see Casey and Kaylee at some point, even if it was to come home for fresh clothes. Cindy did have daily conversation with Casey like she always did. Cindy was expecting to look after Kaylee at some point while she was off work because she assumed Casey was at work. She obviously didn't. On the 3rd of July, Cindy made the decision to drive to Universal because earlier that day Cindy had had some issues and Cindy wanted to speak to Casey and to see Kaylee. Cindy had spoke to Casey earlier and said she was at Universal. The issues were money issues that she wanted to speak to Casey about. When Cindy arrived at Universal, she went to guest services. Cindy called Casey and told her she was there, and Casey told her she wasn't there. She told her she was actually in Jacksonville, which came as a complete shock to Cindy. Casey told her she had gone back to Jacksonville with Jeff and they were going to try and rekindle their whatever they had, relationship, friendship. Cindy was upset and Cindy didn't know what to think because she realised that Casey had been lying to her for the past couple of days. She didn't know what to make of it. She had her reservations about Casey actually being in Jacksonville. Obviously, these lies had been building up, and as much as Cindy wanted to believe Casey, now doubt had set in. Cindy reached out to one of Casey's best friends who lived in Jacksonville to see if he had seen her there. He hadn't seen her there, but he had spoke to her and told Cindy that they had arranged to meet up while Casey was in Jacksonville, so this gave Cindy some reassurance. Cindy reached out to Lee also to see if Casey had spoke to him about where she was, and he hadn't spoke to her in a couple of days, but Lee said that he didn't believe she was in Jacksonville because of what he'd seen on MySpace and Facebook. Lee reached out to some mutual friends to find out if they knew where she was, and the general consensus was that she would be in downtown Orlando. So this again upset Cindy. She was angry and felt betrayed. So that evening, I don't know what the point of why she did this, if she didn't know what she was doing. But that evening, Cindy created her own MySpace account to reach out to Casey. She wrote a long message, about how she felt. But one thing that Cindy didn't realise is that everyone on MySpace would see it. Cindy never really got a response from her, but I think she called her or texted her, and Casey thought Cindy was being hard on her. It's so mixed up, so mixed up. So that's part 1. I know it's in 2 parts, sorry. I don't know why this keeps freezing, but it does. So I'll be back with part 2 as soon as I've edited, uploaded and caught up with the trial. So until then, bye for now.